was a typical day in Buckhead, one of Atlanta's most prestigious neighborhoods, where the towering glass buildings reflected the golden rays of the afternoon sun and luxury cars lined the streets. The hum of high-end vehicles filled the air as the wealthy drove through, their polished exteriors gleaming under the Atlanta sun. Inside Hamilton Prestige Motors, a dealership known for its exclusive clientele, the atmosphere was no different. Madeline Burke, the manager, stood at her mahogany desk surveying the showroom floor like a queen ruling over her domain. With nearly 2 decades in the luxury auto business, she wasn't just any manager, she was the gatekeeper. The customers she allowed into her world of elite automobiles had to meet a certain standard, and Madeline was skilled at spotting who belonged and who didn't. She had an eye for wealth, for class, and for the serious buyers who knew what it meant to drive away with one of those pristine SUVs. As she surveyed her showroom, the soft chime of the doorbell signaled the arrival of a new potential customer. A man stepped inside, a tall, broad-shouldered figure in his 40s, dressed simply in a navy hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable as he glanced around, taking in the polished showroom floor and the lineup of luxury vehicles on display. Without a second thought, Madeline decided what she needed to know. He wasn't a buyer. She turned to her sales associate, Greg, who had been eyeing the man curiously. "Don't waste your time," she murmured, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "He's just looking." Greg hesitated but didn't argue. They'd been working together long enough to know that when Madeline made a call, it was final. But the man wasn't just browsing. Instead, he strolled toward the latest 2024 Range Rover autobiography, a stunning vehicle with sleek black finishes. He lightly ran his fingers along the smooth surface of the car before his gaze locked onto Madeline's. Without missing a beat, he walked straight toward her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and polite. "I'm interested in that Range Rover over there. I'd like to know more about it." Madeline's patience was starting to wear thin. She'd dealt with enough people who wandered in, hoping to impress someone with a test drive but never intended to buy. She gave a tight-lipped smile and replied, "That's a fully loaded autobiography model, $165,000. The man nodded, unbothered by the price. "Sounds like what I'm looking for." Madeline folded her arms, trying to maintain control. "Are you aware of our financing options? A purchase like that requires substantial credit or an upfront payment." She was expecting him to back off, as most people did, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled out a sleek black card holder from his pocket, his expression still unreadable. "I'd like to test drive it," he said, his tone unchanged. Madeline's expression hardened. "We don't offer test drives on vehicles at that price point without verified proof of income," she replied smoothly, trying to maintain the upper hand. "You understand?" The man gave a small, almost knowing smile. "Oh, I understand." But that wasn't the end of it. Greg shifted uncomfortably beside Madeline, sensing something unusual about the situation. He had seen Madeline dismiss potential buyers countless times, but this time, something felt different. The man wasn't defensive or angry. He simply remained calm, unfazed. Madeline, on the other hand, remained firm, now offering a polite but distant smile. "For a car of that value, we require serious inquiries only. We've had issues in the past with people joyriding, then walking away. It's nothing personal," she added, though her insincerity was obvious. The man didn't blink, but then, for just a fraction of a second, there was a shift in his demeanor, a flicker of something colder, sharper, that Madeline couldn't place. It vanished just as quickly as it came. He exhaled through his nose, nodding slowly. "All right. No test drive. Got it." Madeline gave a satisfied tilt of her head, already turning her attention to another customer, an older man browsing a Bentley. But before she could fully disengage, the man in the hoodie spoke again. "What about cash buyers?" Madeline glanced back, her irritation rising. "Excuse me?" "If someone wanted to pay in full, no financing, no credit check, would that change your test drive policy?" he asked, his voice steady. as though this wasn't his first time encountering this kind of resistance. Madeline almost laughed. People didn't buy six-figure cars in cash, especially not from someone who just walked in off the street, at least not the kind of people she expected. She forced a sugary sweet smile. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm sure you can understand that we have policies in place for a reason." This time, the man allowed a shadow of amusement to cross his face, an expression that told Madeline she had underestimated him. She hadn't realized it yet, but this encounter was about to take a surprising turn. The man's calm voice broke the silence, and Madeline's patience began to fray. "I see," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. "So what would it take?" Madeline's smile thinned as she replied, her tone stiffening. "I just told you," she said, trying to maintain control. "We require proof of serious intent. Our vehicles are highly sought after, and we can't have—" "I understand," the man cut in smoothly, his voice still eerily calm. "I'm just trying to figure out where the bar is. What does a serious customer look like to you?" For the first time in the conversation, there was silence. Madeline froze for a split second, an imperceptible pause before her usual confident demeanor returned, quickly masked by a short, breathy laugh. "I think we're done here," she said crisply, her tone final. "If you'd like to browse, feel free, but I have other customers to assist." Greg, who had been silently observing the exchange, expected the man to push back, maybe even storm out in frustration. But to his surprise, the man simply nodded, the corner of his mouth pulling up in something that wasn't quite a smile. Understood. And just like that, he turned and walked away. But there was something unsettling in the way he moved. Slow, deliberate, almost calculating. It left a gnawing feeling in Greg's gut. He couldn't shake the sense that Madeline had made a mistake. The man wasn't angry, embarrassed, or flustered. He carried himself like someone who had just learned something important, as if he was waiting for the perfect moment to act. Greg glanced at Madeline, who had already shifted her focus to another customer. An older man in a tailored suit eyeing a Bentley, flashing her best smile. Business as usual. But across the showroom, the man in the hoodie hadn't left. Instead, he was now casually inspecting another vehicle, a Mercedes-Benz G-Class. His fingers ran along the chrome handle, tilting his head slightly as if admiring the car. Greg couldn't help but watch as Jared, a junior salesman, hesitated before stepping forward. "Hey there, sir," Jared said with his best friendly salesman grin. "Need any help with that one?" The man turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, actually. I was looking at the Range Rover earlier, but I was told test drives are off limits unless I prove I'm serious. Is that true?" Jared blinked, struggling to find the right words. Well, he stammered. But before he could stumble through an answer, Madeline appeared beside him like a shadow. Her smile remained polished, but her eyes were sharp. "Jared, I'll take it from here," she said smoothly. Jared looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. One glance from Madeline and he backed away, disappearing toward the reception desk. The man watched the exchange with quiet amusement. "You sure do keep a tight leash on your employees," he mused, his voice laced with mild amusement. Madeline didn't rise to the bait. "I thought I made myself clear," she said, her tone smooth but firm. "We cater to a specific clientele here, and we can't accommodate every request." There was a beat of silence before the man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You know, I've been to a lot of dealerships," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Some good, some bad, but I've never had someone work this hard to not sell me a car." Madeline's expression hardened, but she kept her composure. "That's not what's happening here," she replied, her voice cool. The man tilted his head slightly as if pondering his next move. "No?" he said. "Well, let's make it easy. I'll write a check right now. Full amount. No financing, no games. Just business." Greg, who had been pretending not to listen from behind the desk, felt his stomach tighten. Madeline stood frozen for a long second, her fingers twitching slightly at her sides. She wasn't stupid. If he really was a cash buyer, shutting him down outright could backfire. But at the same time, she wasn't convinced, and she wasn't about to be proven wrong. Madeline's voice was silky smooth, but there was a tightness in her demeanor as she replied, "That's a generous offer, but as I said, it's company policy. You'd need to provide documentation before we can move forward." The man held her gaze for a moment, and without a flicker of emotion, he slowly reached into his wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a black American Express Centurion card, the kind of card only high-net-worth individuals carried. Greg's eyes widened in disbelief, but Madeline remained unmoved, her professional mask still firmly in place. The silence stretched out between them, and the man allowed her to take it all in before he casually tucked the card back into his pocket. "No test drive, huh?" he said, his voice laced with something that Greg couldn't quite place. Madeline lifted her chin, still composed, her professionalism unwavering. "I'm afraid not." The man studied her for another long beat, then without saying another word, he turned and walked away. But Greg could feel it. Madeline had just made a huge mistake, and she wasn't ready for what was coming. The silence in the showroom felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Madeline stood stiffly, her jaw clenched, her hands tightly clasped in front of her. She had just dismissed a man who had flashed a Centurion card, the type of card that only the wealthiest could possess, and yet she had still refused him. Greg swallowed hard. This did not look good. Across the showroom, the man didn't storm out in anger. He didn't seem rattled at all. Instead, he took his time walking past the rows of high-end vehicles, running a hand over the smooth hoods, nodding slightly to himself, almost as if he were taking notes on the inventory. Then the glass doors swung open, and a sharply dressed man in his mid-50s stepped inside, graying hair, tailored navy suit, and polished leather shoes that barely made a sound against the tiled floor. Greg's stomach dropped. He recognized him immediately. Elliot Gaines, the regional director. Madeline saw him too, and her entire demeanor shifted. She straightened instantly, her voice light and professional. "Mr. Gaines, what a pleasant surprise! What brings you in today?" But Elliot's gaze didn't flicker to her. It was fixed on the man in the hoodie. His face lit up in recognition. "There he is," Elliot said, striding forward with an outstretched hand. "Jordan, I was just about to call you." Greg felt the air in the room shift. It was palpable. Madeline's face drained of color and her posture stiffened. "Jordan?" Madeline said, her voice quieter now, more cautious. "You know each other?" Elliot blinked, his attention finally turning to her. "Of course," he said, his grin widening. "Meet Jordan Ellis, the new CEO of Hamilton Prestige Motors." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Everyone in the showroom froze as if time itself had come to a halt. Greg didn't move. No one did except Madeline. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her entire body locked up as the realization hit her. The man standing before her, the one she had just dismissed, was her new boss. Jordan simply watched her, his expression unreadable. He exhaled slowly, his hands sliding into his pockets as if he were simply observing a moment of profound irony. "Miss Burke," he said evenly, his voice calm but carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. "You just refused to sell a car to your new boss." The impact of those words sent a shockwave through the showroom. Some employees stared in shock, others in poorly concealed amusement. Greg's heart pounded in his chest. He had known. He had known something was off, but he never expected it to unfold like this. And Madeline, who had always been in control, looked genuinely afraid for the first time. The silence in the showroom was thick, suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. Madeline blinked rapidly, her brain scrambling for footing. This had to be a mistake. A joke. The man standing before her, the one she had just humiliated, couldn't be her new CEO. And yet Elliot had said it out loud, in front of everyone. Jordan let the words settle in the air before he spoke again. He tilted his head slightly, an almost amused expression crossing his face. "I have to say, I expected to get a sense of how this dealership operates today," Jordan said, letting a pause linger. "But I didn't expect this." Madeline's stomach twisted, the air in the showroom suddenly feeling thick with tension. For over 2 decades, she had worked in sales, handled difficult clients, high-pressure deals, VIPs who expected the world on a silver platter. But this was something entirely different. Elliot, finally catching on to the rising tension between them, glanced between the two. "Wait, what happened?" Jordan didn't respond right away. He let the moment stretch out, watching Madeline carefully like a teacher eyeing a student who was about to fail a test. Then, casually, he turned to Greg. "What's your name?" Greg's mouth went dry. He swallowed hard. Greg, sir?" Jordan nodded, his gaze steady. "You've been here long?" 3 years, Greg replied, almost too quickly. Jordan let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "Let me ask you something, Greg. If I had walked in here today wearing a suit, speaking the exact same words I just did, would I have had to pull out my credit card just to be taken seriously?" Greg hesitated. He knew the answer, everyone did, but saying it out loud could cost him his job. Jordan seemed to sense his hesitation and offered a slight nod. "You don't have to answer that." Then he turned back to Madeline. She had regained some of her composure, but her usual sharp confidence was gone, replaced by something else, something uncertain. "Mr. Ellis," she began, her voice smooth but a little too practiced, the tone of someone trying to manage a situation slipping out of their control. "I truly apologize if there was any misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Jordan's brow lifted, a hint of amusement in his voice. "That's what you're going with?" Madeline forced a chuckle, but it fell flat. "I was simply following store policy. We have strict guidelines when it comes to test drives on luxury models. I would have handled any customer the same way." Jordan studied her for a moment, his gaze unflinching. Slowly, he turned to Elliot. "Elliot," he said casually, "tell me, when did Hamilton Prestige Motors start requiring a soft credit check before customers could even sit inside a car?" Elliot's brow furrowed. "We don't!" Madeline's last defense snapped, the truth crashing down like a heavy weight. Jordan didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. And somehow, that made it worse. Madeline's palms were damp now. She felt it, the realization that she wasn't in control anymore. Jordan wasn't finished. Her throat felt tight. Her mind raced for an explanation, for an escape, anything that could undo the last few minutes. But there was no undoing it. Jordan tilted his head slightly, watching her with the patience of someone who had already won. "So, just to be clear," he said, his voice calm and deliberate, "you refused to sell me a car because I didn't look like someone who could afford it?" Madeline opened her mouth to respond, but Jordan wasn't finished. "You made assumptions. You dismissed me, you lied about company policy, and when I called you on it, you doubled down." He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. "Tell me, Madeline, what exactly does a serious customer look like to you?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She scrambled for footing, forcing a tight smile. "Mr. Ellis, I assure you that wasn't my intent at all. We have high standards here, and I was simply ensuring high standards." Jordan cut her off, raising an eyebrow. "Really?" Madeline stammered, but she couldn't find the words. Across the room, Greg, Jared, and the other employees stood frozen, watching as their manager slowly unraveled in front of them. Elliot cleared his throat and stepped in. "Jordan, obviously this isn't how we want any of our customers treated." "I'm not a customer," Jordan said coolly. "I'm the CEO. And I just watched my own sales manager decide on site who does and doesn't belong here." The room went still. Madeline felt the blood drain from her face. She had always operated with a level of untouchability. She knew the business inside and out. She had been here for years. She had built a reputation as someone who got results. But none of that mattered now. Jordan turned back to her, his expression unreadable. He didn't need to say another word. It was clear. Madeline's world had just come crashing down. "I came here undercover for a reason," Jordan said, his voice steady. "To see how our customers are treated, to see if the values we claim to uphold are actually being practiced." He paused for a moment before adding, "I've seen enough." Madeline's chest tightened. She tried to hold her ground, her voice wavering just slightly. "I understand your concern," she said, but then quickly followed up. But surely we can talk about this. I've been a valuable part of this company for years. I've closed deals that no one else could. My track record speaks for itself. Jordan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right, he said. Your track record does speak for itself. A flicker of relief crossed Madeline's face, but it was short-lived. That's why you're done here. Madeline froze. For the first time in her entire career, she had nothing to say. She had always been in control, always had a response, a way to spin things in her favor. But now, she was speechless. Jordan's voice remained steady as he continued. I don't run a company that turns people away based on appearances. If that's a problem for you, then this was never the place for you to begin with. The air in the showroom felt thick, suffocating. The other employees exchanged uneasy glances, but no one stepped in to defend her. Elliot exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. He wasn't going to fight it. Madeline swallowed hard, her body rigid. Jordan waited for a response, but for the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. And with that, the conversation was over. Madeline stood there, frozen, as the weight of the moment sank in. Everything she had built, everything she had worked for was gone in an instant. The pressure on her chest felt like a vice. She wanted to fight back, to argue, to plead her case. But deep down, she knew there was no talking her way out of this. She had done this to herself. The employees remained silent, some stealing glances at each other, others staring at the floor. No one stepped forward to defend her. Jordan didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply watched her with the quiet understanding of a man who had seen this story play out before. Finally, he turned to Elliot. We need to have a conversation about the hiring and training process, he said. This isn't about one employee. It's about the culture we allow. Elliot nodded slowly, rubbing his chin. Understood. Jordan glanced around the showroom. I'll be personally reviewing the way things are run here. Some things are going to change. Greg exhaled slowly, feeling the tension shift in the room. For the first time, it felt like someone in charge actually cared. Jordan then turned back to Madeline one last time. I hope this is a lesson, he said, his tone cool but calm, because the real loss here isn't just your job. It's the opportunity to be better. To do better. Madeline's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Jordan nodded once, his voice quiet but final. Good luck. And with that, he walked away, leaving her standing there alone. As Jordan left the showroom, the employees slowly began to move. The air felt lighter, different, as if a shift had taken place. Greg exchanged glances with Jared, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. This wasn't just about one bad manager. It was about how people are treated, about how power and assumptions can shape an entire workplace. Jordan had walked in expecting to see a business in action. Instead, he had exposed a problem much bigger than one person. It's easy to assume. Easy to judge people based on appearances, on first impressions. But how often do we stop and question our own biases? Madeline thought she knew who belonged and who didn't. She thought she was in control. But in the end, the only thing she controlled was her own downfall. If this story made you think, even for a second, then share it. Let's start conversations that matter. And if you haven't yet, subscribe for more stories that challenge the way we see the world, because the smallest decisions can have the biggest consequences.